Good morning and welcome. This is day 3 of the 13th National Conference on Health Disparities and the 2021 National Environmental Justice Conference and Training Program. I'm Carolyn Sawyer, and it's a pleasure to be your facilitator again this year. We're happy to be with you and happy that you're getting so much great information from the last 2 days of this conference and the topics that we have covered. Our mission is to address health disparities, environmental justice, and the shaping of the future of healthcare. So we invite you to relax. We've got 2 exciting panels for you today as we conclude on this day 3. We're going to start out this morning with panel 6, and we have a wonderful group of individuals that are on that panel, perfect for this topic, which is the role of social justice in addressing health disparities and environmental justice. So this discussion will address everything from gun violence, which we seem to see every single day, human trafficking, the plight of migrant children, and other topics, including police reform. So with us this morning, we have one of our friends to the conference who's been with us for some time, and it's always great to see her. We're all reminiscing about how we miss seeing each other in person, and we're hopeful to have that back in order in the next few months as we perhaps go into 2020. But I'd like for you to welcome Dr. Britt Rios Ellis. She is the Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and the Provost at Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan. And we welcome you, Brett. It's great to see you. I've dropped that formality, but it's just wonderful to see your face and to see that you're safe and well. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's just so great to see you as well. And to be with all of you again. I know it's virtual, but here discussing the most important role of social justice in addressing health disparities and environmental justice. So we're going to address a lot of different things, and I have the real honor of introducing someone I deeply admire and miss not seeing at these events because we always are able to find ourselves on the same panel, and that is the Honorary Donna Christensen, and she is going to talk about an issue that is just so important, which is the deep and devastating impact of social justice and racial trauma on individuals and communities. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce Donna.
Thank you, Britt. And it's wonderful to be with everyone, even though it's just virtual. And good morning to all of the audience. I'm going to share some information on something I'm just learning about myself, but something that I believe is critical to understanding why increasing our efforts towards social and environmental justice must be at the heart of any effort to eliminate health disparities. When I began leading the CBC Health Brain Trust, we were focusing on disease. We quickly moved to concentrate, though, on root causes and the discrimination in healthcare. But soon after that, looking over the large body of knowledge and the funding spent on the diseases with very little observable change in disparities, our focus expanded to and still remains on the critical social, economic, and environmental determinants of health. And while our advocacy for social justice needs to encompass it all, we must do so understanding that the underpinning of it is what psychologists have termed racial trauma. Racial trauma, or race-based traumatic stress, is defined as the cumulative effects of racism on individuals' mental and physical health. And it includes ethnic trauma, because people of all color experience it. African Americans and First Nations, though, have borne the trauma for centuries. As we see and feel every day, racism influences everything about our lives as Black people and other people of color. It's baked into American culture, its systems, and today is too often played out in individual encounters. I'm sharing a few slides to emphasize how and where we most experience that racial trauma. Beginning with education, which we'll hear a lot more from Dr. Rios Ellis about. But while disparities in education existed before the last administration, there's a lot of fixing that needs to be done after the neglect and damage done by this lady and her boss. The funding gap is monumental, and our schools are once again becoming separate and unequal. Just as the pandemic has widened gaps in health, it has had a devastating impact on the education of minority children, who are more often left on virtual learning despite a continuing digital divide. The damage must be addressed to ensure that our children are able to reach their full potential. But there's more damage that the house that racism has built into America's education system. It has helped to fill the country's prison pipeline. African American and Latino children experience more expulsions, suspensions, and in-school arrests, which is even worse if they happen to be in foster care. The same is true of children in our tribal nations. And these adverse reactions and actions begin in the early grades. This recent story of arrest of 4 Black girls in elementary and middle school who had done nothing more than witness an altercation should cause our collective outrage and call to action. We must disrupt the school to prison pipeline and also address and work to reverse the damage already being done to our children. Studies have demonstrated that these early negative confrontations with law enforcement not only lead to future legal infractions, but also to health issues. Too many of our Black and brown men and women are jailed for minor nonviolent infractions, even when clearly innocent. I just include this slide and story of how now Attorney Mead to note that even when known to be innocent, barriers are put in the way of one's freedom and restoration of rights. His incarceration will definitely affect his health in many ways, but it has also likely taken a toll on the lives and health of his family. The data shows that Black people are the ones most likely to be killed by police. The families, of course, are the most intensely affected, but we as a people also experience vicarious racial trauma as we are bombarded with the images, the stories, and the vulnerabilities that we feel. But consider that more than half of the killings are not even being reported, and I'm guessing that many of those misclassified are tribal members. I know that Chief Reginald Burgess will bring his perspective on law enforcement issues. This is also an environmental justice conference, and the environment assaults on African Americans and other people of color are many, widespread, and ongoing. As an example, the Flint water crisis has still not been completely resolved, and now another community with a largely Black population is facing a similar one. I can guarantee you that these are not the only 2 majority Black or brown communities with high levels of lead in their water. And when first identified, that lead has already probably been there for years, affecting our children's brain development and other systems. Lead poisoning can cause learning disabilities, behavioral problems, as well as cause individuals to be more susceptible to disease. The impacts can be lifelong. Another issue, the marked adverse impact of redlining on our health and well-being has been and continues to be totally unacceptable. The racial trauma that this presents is not obvious and immediate as it is when someone is maimed or killed. This form of racial and systemic racism, this form is slow, insidious, and long-term. And while it affects individuals, it goes far beyond because it includes entire communities, can affect larger affected racial or ethnic populations, and it can become intergenerational. Because redlining selectively ushered Blacks into areas with high industrial pollution, we die in larger numbers from cancer than all other population groups. And the years of discrimination and the many ways it has undermined our health has left us more vulnerable not only to cancer, but also to the ravages of COVID. The same already sickened neighborhoods became the most vulnerable during the pandemic. It has also made us the proverbial canary in the coal mine, but this time for climate change. Because of redlining, we disproportionately live in areas where there has been no investment in adaptations to mitigate the impact of climate change and protect lives. The next 2 slides are just one example of how climate change is already affecting minority neighborhoods that were created by housing discrimination. Look at the difference in this Black Richmond neighborhood, where the lack of tree cover and open areas of bare concrete and asphalt is trapping heat and raising high and unhealthy temperatures, compared to this one in a white neighborhood nearby that is very much different with an abundance of tree shade and designed to be much cooler. There are so many environmental factors affecting our health. Another very familiar one is the preying on Black and brown communities with tobacco advertising and liquor sales. In some places, the number of liquor sales stores in our neighborhoods is 10 times that in the white areas. During these tracks, like the red one, red track 5, created by redlining, the disparities are undeniable and stark. In the redlined area, where there's a high percentage of minorities, we see higher poverty, lower life expectancy, more obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and pulmonary diseases. This cries out for social justice. And lastly, we cannot ignore the impact of discrimination on the very healthcare system. It didn't start with COVID. Reports show that during the pandemic, 1 in 5 people of color experienced at least one episode of discrimination when seeking healthcare services. COVID caused a drop in life expectancy across all age groups, but markedly so in Black and Hispanic Americans. But for Black Americans, it was almost 3 times worse than for the white population. Discrimination in healthcare is not just because of individual bias. The racism is baked into the system through algorithms that discriminate and thus determine that some of us are not worthy of the best care. This just reflects the environment in which African Americans, tribal people, and other people of color live day in, day out, year in, year out. And beyond our behavioral responses, which can sometimes understandably be negative, such as smoking, alcohol, drug abuse, and even avoidance of healthcare, what I find most alarming are the psychological, biological, and genetic responses that are not as obvious, but so profoundly damaging to our health and life experiences. One of these is telomere shortening. Telomeres are located at the edges of chromosomes. They protect them, they delay aging when long, and allow deterioration and accelerate aging when shortened. There are many studies that have looked at this. Among the findings are that alcohol use, cigarette smoking, lack of exercise, diet, and stress shorten telomeres more in African Americans and even more so in Black women, resulting in more chronic diseases, cancers, and deaths at younger ages. And in all of the studies, poverty, education, and other factors were controlled and not at play. The key takeaway from one paper is lifestyle factors also racially cause stress, whose shortening telomeres can increase our propensity to cancers and accelerate group aging. But the good news is, as we have always known, changing those habits and adopting healthier lifestyles, while it may not fully reverse what has already occurred, has been shown to slow down telomere shortening and the illnesses of aging. Weathering is another phenomenon that undermines our health. Here, the process is entirely different and has been clearly determined to be directly related to racial trauma and the stress it causes. It's defined by allostatic load, which is measured through chemical and physical biomarkers. The higher load or score is associated with premature aging, increased chronic diseases, vulnerability to infectious diseases, cognitive decline, other psychosocial issues, and the premature preventable deaths that are the tragic hallmark of health disparities. It's important to note that all the research suggests that beyond individual impact, this extends to affected populations, and Black women, again, are the most impacted. Lastly, it's critical that we recognize that the stress of racial trauma can also trigger genetic changes, and that the health effects caused by the marginalization experienced in one generation can become embedded through genetic changes that can be transmitted to subsequent generations, who, even though they may be wealthier and live in a nice neighborhood, may still experience health inequities and disparities. And I need to speak for a moment about our resiliency and the fact that we continue to stand strong, tall, and push forward despite all that African Americans and other people of color continue to suffer. The research of Dr. Geronimus and others indicates that the lived experience of racism and discrimination that creates weathering, and I would add telomere shortening and epigenetic changes, may be the greatest among the more resilient among us, those most likely to engage in what they call high effort coping. This suggests that while coping skills and resiliency has been and remains critical to our survival, In the larger scheme of things, it does not prevent and likely exacerbates these detrimental and sometimes lethal changes. What is required to protect our bodies from these deleterious effects is an action response. Our addressing racism when we meet it on a personal level when possible. And very importantly, on the population level, where it can have its greatest impact. As this panel suggests, our actions to ensure social justice is absolutely required if we're ever to eliminate health disparities and achieve health equity. And to bring about social justice, we must address the political determinants of health. All of the research leads us here. From Auburn University, racism continues to be a pressing social and moral dilemma as well as a public health issue. From the researcher Espinoza, to truly achieve equitable health conditions for ourselves and generations to come, we also need to eliminate the everyday environmental stressors that unrelentingly tax minorities. Doctors Geronimus and Thompson go straight to the point. Public policies and practices reflecting prevailing ideological viewpoints harm African American communities. And why our work for social justice leads there comes from the author of The Political Determinants of Health, Daniel Dawes. The political determinants are the instigators of the causes of inequities. They are the determinants of the determinants, which have a cascading effect on our health. So every political level, neighborhood, city, county, state, and federal, is where an unrelenting effort for social justice must be waged. Confronting racism and fighting back is not only what's required, it is the antidote to telomeres, weathering, and epigenetics that is at the root of our poor health. The cause and struggle for social justice has never been and will not be easy now because it's a fight to end racism. The leadership of BLM and the events of recent years and months have fueled our passion. The opportunity that the current administration and leaders like Jim Clyburn have created should have energized our hope. Our knowledge that it is racial trauma that is primarily responsible for health disparities must compel us to act. We cannot allow racial trauma to continue to make us ill, to disable us, to shorten our lives, and then pass it on to future generations. Our complete dedication to social justice is imperative if we are to improve the health and lives of today's and future generations, and if we're to ensure that our people and our communities are ever to live a longer, higher quality of life and one of wellness. So thank you. I look forward to the questions.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I am sharing my slides now. I'm going to talk to you about education and health equity and COVID. Let's see if I can. So now I'm trying to share. Which one? I know I did it before. There we go. Can you see my slides now? Okay. Window. There we go. Okay, I want to talk to you about the relationship between higher education and COVID. And I want to talk a little bit about piggybacking on what Donna was talking about in terms of health disparities. And in the US, we tend to frame these as individual choices, when in fact, we really need to look to larger things beyond exercise and nutrition and things that do affect our health. But we really need to look at structural racism and how it's reinforced through neighborhood exposure and safety, access to clean water, as Donna was just sharing, nutritional behaviors such as access to fresh food, quality education and opportunities for extracurricular activities, such as living in green environments, and the history of and access to quality health care. And that means culturally resonant care, that folks can receive care from a provider who looks like them and understands their environment, and also exposure to discrimination. such as the stress that is caused in the high cortisol levels, which lead to the weathering that Donna just discussed. And more importantly, living in neighborhoods where you see options and access to opportunity and hope, and you're able to see role models around you and don't experience what many refer to as imposter syndrome, which is often what folks experience when they enter environments such as higher education, where they don't see folks like them. So when we think about health disparities, what we're really thinking about are differences in health outcomes among groups of folks. And we can see this just, literally by going 8 miles down the road in Marin County, where folks have a 15-year increase in life expectancy. Latinos are less likely to receive advice, as are African Americans, from a health provider to quit smoking than are white folks. And when we see all of these disparities day in and day out, they lead to disease, injury, and mortality. So when we're thinking about a path to achieve health equity, definitely in terms of eliminating discrimination, improving housing, and we just think of the issues associated with asthma, for example, where literally roaches in the home, leads to exacerbated asthma. Educational opportunities and folks, and that's my area of passion, where folks have an opportunity to see themselves in a position that is more than. And we've seen this exacerbated during COVID, because folks often are getting, now that jobs are paying just a little bit more, people get stuck in careers, leave educational paths, or maybe haven't had role models to lead them in those paths. Access to quality, affordable health care, high quality neighborhood conditions with good environmental qualities, stable income and job security, and access to food security, not going hungry, and access to healthy foods. So when we look at the role of education in creating health equity, we know that folks that don't have a high school diploma have a 9-year decrease in lifespan, are twice as likely to die in the next 5 years, have a 15% prevalence for diabetes, and with just a bachelor's degree, they're 26% more likely to die in 5-year follow-up compared with those who have a professional degree. So I'm not just asking you to go on for your bachelor's degree, I'm asking you to get your master's degree and your doctoral degree. And as a provost, that way I can hire you and make you one of our faculty as well. So I'm doing a little job pitch. And in terms of professional degree, for folks that have a higher level degree, a graduate degree, only 7% likelihood of having diabetes, and much more likely to live longer, more productive, healthier, and disease-free lives. So we know that access to health care, unfortunately, just explains 10% of health status, but it is such a huge industry in the United States, and that's where we're focusing. So we know that poor health often results from low educational attainment in terms of asthma, disabilities, vision, attention deficit, and it leads to absenteeism. And unfortunately with COVID, we have seen those cracks in our social fabric deepen through increased educational disparities. COVID has led to poor mental health, Zoom fatigue, isolation, and depression. And the average Black or Latino student remains 2 years now behind white students, and African Americans and Latinos are more likely, as are Native Americans, to attend poorly resourced schools, lack access to courses and programs that support student success, 4 times more likely to experience disciplinary exclusion, and twice as likely to be arrested. So when we look at the compounding effects of COVID-19, as of February 2021, 37,300 to 43,000, and that's as of February. Unfortunately, it's much worse now. Children have lost a parent to COVID, and African Americans accounted for 20% of these numbers. Black and Latino families are more likely to have lost jobs. They've been more likely to go hungry because of school closures, which lead to lost meals, as in many neighborhoods, the school lunch or the school breakfast are some of the most valuable meals of the day, and experienced homelessness. And as of March 2021, 58% of white students were attending in-person instruction, compared to 36% and 35% of Black and Latinx students respectively. They've lacked technology, lacked internet access, and lacked bandwidth. And oftentimes, one student, when I was in California, came to me and said, I really need some help with access because there's these communities are often tight. She had computer access, but her mom had lent the password to everyone else in the apartment to help others out, which is a really wonderful thing. But unfortunately, her daughter, therefore, didn't have sufficient bandwidth to complete her coursework. So as an educational administrator, we have to look to doing different things. And when we look at the impact of COVID on higher education, we've done things such as source computers, iPads, provided pins so folks can get in, provided internet cards, all kinds of things that we can do to make sure that folks have access. So we've seen something that is just a phenomena, a very negative phenomena as a result of COVID. Folks are giving up, and they're giving up at such young ages. So we've seen over 500,000 undergraduate students decline in the fall of 2020. So they're not attending higher education. They're giving up on their college aspirations. 11.4% decrease in graduates from high schools, poverty high schools attending college, with a 13% decline in community college enrollment. We've seen more market enrollment drops by males, Native Americans by 18.4%, Black men by 14.3%, Latinx by 12.6%, and whites, of course, less than that at 11.7%. We've also seen enrollment in minority serving institutions and tribal colleges decreasing by 63%, 32% having experienced at least a 10% drop. Hispanic serving institutions have experienced a 70% drop, and Asian and Native American schools with a 58% drop. Oops, I went over that too fast. Those are Anapisis. I'm sorry, Pacific Islanders. Students are increasingly experiencing difficulty paying for college, and they've also lost work. 40% lost their jobs, and 61% reported living in families with less income. 80% of college students reported that COVID negatively impacted their mental health. So 76% had a difficulty just maintaining a regular routine, getting enough exercise, concentrating and focusing, difficulty with online learning. And students have managed just a great deal. They're managing mask and vaccine mandates, and vaccine uptake, fortunately, has been very, very high. And students are often interpreting the science that their families cannot when they're coming from lower educated families. Students in public schools are experiencing scant mental health resources, needed counseling, mentoring, tutoring, and career and graduate school planning. So when we look at education and vaccination, the US often looks at race or ethnicity, which is really important, but we know that education is the strongest determinant. What motivates folks to vaccinate is literally hope for the future, often familism, people that have experienced their families ill or a dying family member, and seeing the local impact in their regional hospitals. Parental education definitely leads to vaccination, and we know that 91% of those in the US with a bachelor's degree are vaccinated. So when we look at COVID costs and how much it's cost higher education, we've lost $85 billion in lost revenues, $24 billion in COVID-related expenses, $74 billion in anticipated future decreases in state funding, for a total of $183 billion. So when we look at the population, there's something that we need to interpret very carefully. So we see that Asians have had the highest uptakes of vaccination, and followed by whites, Latinos, and African Americans. However, when we look at age and we look at those who are over 12 years of age, we still see that Asians have the highest uptake. Then we see that Latinos have the second highest uptake, followed by whites and African Americans. Although gaps exist, we need to focus on the eligible. And what we're seeing, for example, is that states are changing what their criteria is and we have to look to the myriad of disparities that contribute to COVID. So in Arizona, for example, Latino vaccination rates actually went down because they changed it from administration, from country of administration to county of residence, which excluded non-residents. So they weren't counted in the vaccination. So when we look again, as of October 18th, what we're seeing is that people are vaccinating in proportion to their population percentage. So here we're seeing whites are getting vaccinated, actually a little bit less than their proportion in the population. Latinos are pretty well straight on, or African Americans are in percentage, so 11%. Latinos, and then slightly higher with Asian, and a little bit lower with Native Americans. But we're seeing that those disparities in race and vaccination uptake can't be explained by racial difference anymore. They're more likely to be explained by all of the social determinants we're discussing. So the two major determinants were not having a high school diploma and having a high percentage of African American residents due to those health disparities. So vaccine hesitancy was associated with economic hardship, and vaccine refusal was associated with lower education. So what is the role of a minority serving institution? And basically it's that opportunity to really strive to improve health, education, and social equity among the diverse communities with whom we work and serve. So when we're looking at short-sighted political and economic interests and how they're governing our health and educational interests, we really need to look to the role of MSIs. And in my mind, we should be looking at HBCUs, HSIs, tribal colleges and universities to really bolster that culturally responsive workforce issue, as well as engender within communities the things that we can do to make things better. So youth actioning and mentoring, and increasing culturally resonant health programs and research. So these are all the things that we can do. We really have to look at social capital and resilience. We don't want to just leave people in a state of resilience, but actually help students recognize how much self-efficacy they've gained through this process of engaging in these programs. MSIs can easily link with community-based organizations and nonprofits focusing on health disparities, create multi-tiered vaccination and COVID prevention programs, and conduct local community-based participatory and bench research that is translational and makes a positive difference in local health needs. So when we look at how much COVID has cost us overall, when we're looking at all of the costs, we're up to $16 trillion. So when I go back to the title of my presentation, comparing that to the cost of education, it's just education is so much cheaper to do and so much more morally compelling if we're educating folks compared to spending it on COVID. So public colleges spent $225 billion, private colleges $395 billion. So we cannot afford not to educate nor vaccinate, and really need to promote the role of MSIs in COVID prevention and vaccination to help get our folks back on track. Thank you. So I'm going to stop now and turn it over to our next presenter, Chief Reginald Burgess.
Good morning. You can call me Reggie. I'm very, very honored to be here this morning. And as a matter of fact, I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to really basically go off of my knowledge and let the Lord Spirit lead and guide me. I'm listening to Honorable Ms. Christensen and Dr. Ellis, and I'm telling you, I mean, I can't follow that, but I'm going to do the best I can. The problem I see, and really it's not a problem, I got into law enforcement in 1989, once I came back home from college, and I came right back to the community that I grew up in. And the community I grew up in is called Liberty Hill. If you do your homework, Liberty Hill was created in 1871. Four freed black men bought the property from a family. And they bought the property, and the whole idea of buying the property in 1871, but 5-6 years after the Civil War, was to actually create a community, but I guess in essence to follow the American dream. And they actually created, they took that property, subdivided it, and they sold properties to African Americans who were just coming out of the Civil War and trying to establish homes. And then they actually created streets. They actually created storefronts. They actually created community centers. And most importantly, 5 churches sprung up on the Liberty Hill community. And the reason why I say this to you about Liberty Hill, because I'm a true descendant of slaves. My wife are true descendants of slaves right here in Charleston. And we can kind of go back a long way to kind of prove that point. But I tell you that because I want you to understand, as a Black man in law enforcement, especially in the neighborhood I grew up in, I never, ever thought anything different other than to do the best I can in my community when I could. When I came back home after playing football in Maryland, my aspirations was to actually play on Friday nights. That was high school. Second goal was to play on Saturdays. That was in college. I did that. And then I went to play on Sundays. That didn't come to light. So I kicked in gear as my parents raised me to, and the educational system raised me to kick it in gear to use the knowledge that I had received. And I got into law enforcement really just trying to make a difference in my community, because when I was in college from 84 to 88, when I would come home when I could, I saw my community, which is called Liberty Hill, transform from a community of families, church-going folks, picnics, family reunions, nothing but love. We knew each and every one. You could not walk down the street and just walk, just to hang out and didn't speak to the folks that were in the porches. Because if you did, that was a sign of disrespect. I was taught how to open doors for women. I was taught how to treat a young lady as a flower, as I would want somebody to treat my mother. So I grew up in a family that wanted more out of me and wanted me to give as much as I could with the American experience. So when I came in law enforcement, and I grew up in all Black communities, all of them. When I got in law enforcement, I kind of started to see things that was kind of a little different than what I was raised to believe. And what I was raised to believe basically is, you treat everybody fair. It doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, what religion you practice. Law enforcement is a great organization when it's focused on the needs of the people. So I'm going to go a little quicker, but in 2015, I just became the assistant chief of police. I was happy as a butterfly because, hey, I'm elevating myself and I can see a lot of things that my parents and my teachers taught me, and they were working out fine. Well, in 2015, if you remember, we experienced the Walter Scott shooting. It was my department. I remember that morning because it was a Saturday, and my daughter was attending the University of South Carolina in Columbia, and my wife and I were going to see her. And I got a call, and the call stated that we had an officer-involved shooting. When I told my wife I have to go back to get my police cruiser to get to the scene, and she took me back. And when I got to the scene, I was the last person there. All I knew from the chief at the time and our PIO was what former Officer Michael Slager said. When I got to the scene, he wasn't there. The state law enforcement division was there, and the coroner was there. So as that day progressed and the crime scene got smaller, the Sunday we were getting prepared as an agency to be able to talk to the civil rights activists and the media on that Monday. So when I got in that Monday morning, I got around 7:45. The chief of police at the time came to me and said to me, AC, they call me AC for short, for assistant chief. We have a video that needs to be shown to us. And that video doesn't look good for us. But I didn't think at the time that it was going to be that bad. I thought that maybe we made a mistake, or maybe the officer might have hit the person when he shouldn't have, something like that. That was wrong, but something we can kind of, we can work, kind of work through. When Slade came down and brought the video, it was the first time I had seen what, you all had seen. It was Monday morning. and it was around about 8:30. And when I saw that video, it hurt me. When I saw that video, it crushed me. And when I saw that video, I said that this is not what I signed up for. It was not what I signed up for. And that moment, I just said to myself, I said, Lord, if, I had already had my 25 years, or really coming close to it. And this state, you do 25 years, you can retire. So I was looking at, doing some other things. And I said right then, the Lord's Spirit said, you have a lot of work to do. So what I'm saying to you all, in essence, is that in crisis, that's when you really going to measure the true person. And in law enforcement, we have so many situations that we're involved in crisis. And some of our agencies simply don't get it. But the ones that do get it are the ones who understand the true nature of what we're supposed to be doing here. What we're supposed to be doing is to serve and to protect. But the protection comes with what we do. But the service is the most important part, because the service means that individual home that we go to, that individual car that we go to that do a traffic accident, that individual we stop because of a traffic infraction, that individual that we have to talk to move on down the road, those individuals need to get the best service that we can give them. And I feel that community policing in this nation, and I told a former United States Attorney Barr this in Columbia, I told him this. I said, if you would actually get the federal government to actually mandate racial bias, unconscious-based bias, you would get them to have a mandate throughout the nation that all departments have to not only take this type of training once in a while, it should be thoroughly immersed in their everyday training. It's really sad when some agencies train more in shooting than they train more in relationship building. And that's what the Lord placed in my heart when I became the chief of police in 2018. My main goal is to be relationship policing, to get a relationship with the people that we serve, even the ones that don't like us, the ones that hate us, the ones that don't care anything about us. If they are calling us, they need us. So I look at the three topics here: gun violence, human trafficking, and migrant children plight. And all those topics are all violent, and they're all criminal in intent. In North Charleston, our highest volume crimes are murders, rapes, robberies, aggravated assaults, gunshots, and vandalism by gun shooting. We're in the midst at the end of a racial bias audit that was performed by CNA. When they came to me in 2019, I told them anything we can do to make our department better, I'm all in with it. We spoke to the city council members, we developed a panel, and we selected CNA to come in. And I sat back and and talked to CNA folks, and I told them, there's a part, if you all ever looked at Boys in the Hood, there's a part in that movie that says either they don't know, they don't show, or don't care about what's going on in the neighborhood. Now, Ice Cube was saying that, people, in relationship to what he thought the majority outside the neighborhoods were thinking. But I have to flip that, people, because I got to keep it real. I believe that goes for the community as well, our communities, Black communities, Latino communities, Asian communities, any community that's in America, it should apply within itself. We sometimes get so bombarded with what the majority community is not doing and what they are not saying and what they're not bringing to us. There are a lot of great men and women that have come before us, and a lot of them said, why should we have to sit back and wait on others to do for us while we can do for ourselves? So I really truly believe that if we, as a community, if we don't want murders to happen, if we don't want rapes to happen, we don't want robbery and aggravated assault, the community itself, we can do it, but we have to do it with the police. The police are the public, and the public are the police. And that's my direction. My direction is relationship policing. There's no way that I can bring violent crime down, or I can keep these communities safe with the efforts that we are actually putting in as a law enforcement agency if we don't have the community involved. If we don't speak to the folks who live there, all you all live in the community. if I come in your community and I said to you as a chief of police, well, Miss Carolyn, we're going to come into your community and we're going to do DL checkpoints, or we're going to do radar operations. You may say, okay, that's fine. But I believe that you would buy in and you would appreciate it more if I asked you, Ms. Carolyn, what do you think we should do in your neighborhood? What are the issues in your neighborhood that you think we should address? And that's my thinking. Now, I may be one of the minority people in law enforcement as a leader to think like that, but that's what we do here in North Charleston. In North Charleston, in 2018, we had 20 homicides. Now, we have a population of 130,000 people. 2019, we had 26 homicides. 2020, we had 23 homicides. And at this present date and time, we're at 21. And the majority of our homicides, the victims are African Americans. The majority of our homicides suspects are African Americans. And some folks say to me, well, where's black on black crime? And I don't agree with saying that, because I'm like this. Whenever an Arab person goes to a synagogue and he kills a Jewish person, whenever a Catholic goes to a Protestant church and does the same thing, this country never says it's Catholic versus Protestant. It never says it's Arab versus Jew. They call it a tragedy. They call it, something that should never happen. And I believe that if we, as African-American community, if we continue to label ourselves as black on black, we will never be able to impact the issues that we need to be better. In North Charleston, you have a population of 130,000, like I said. 46% of those folks are African Americans. There are communities in North Charleston that's close to the old naval base that the average salary is $17,500. So, Ms. Christensen, you are 100% right. I believe that a lot of the social disparities issues, first is lack of positive parents. You may have a parent in your home, but that parent is not positive, and that parent is not trying to invest in you and get you and drive you and motivate you. I mean, you're on your own. Then you have educational system. I'm not beating the educational system up because I attended Charleston County schools, and I think I did pretty good. I wasn't an A student, but I did pretty good. But what I'm saying is, I think that the educational system needs to address the individual student. See, when I was coming out of high school, at probably my sophomore year, I had a lot of letters to go play football and run track. So I had things coming toward me. But just imagine a young woman or man that's in a school who happen to be a minority that doesn't have an aspiration to go to a 2-year school, or don't have aspiration to go to a 4-year school, or don't have aspiration to go to any higher learning. That doesn't mean that that person is lacking and the person is going to fail. I believe that the school system should individually look at the individual and say, okay, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What do you really want to do? And invest in that. The third thing is the healthcare disparities. You're 100% right. My mother had 2 sons. I was born in 1965. My brother was born in 1968. She had 2 sons. A young mother with 2 kids. We had to move into the projects. It used to be old Georgia Green. Moved there, right by the naval base. So my mother worked 3 jobs: a restaurant in the morning, a restaurant in the evening, and she would go to Mount Pleasant to clean up in the doctor's office. She had those 2 boys that she had to take care of. Never did she ever place herself on welfare. The only thing that she needed was housing assistance. And I remember my mother, and I was 9 years old, my mother told me the reason why I am on this is because I need to get help. Once I get on my foot, I am getting off of this. And she did that because she aspired to do that. Healthcare disparities, the same thing. If you don't have a doctor or a pediatrician or somebody that you can go to that knows your background, all you're going to do is go there and they're going to treat you and get you out the door because it's next man or woman up. So when you don't have that, it becomes troublesome, and it becomes like you feel again that nobody cares for you. Minorities, I sit back and I look at the minority neighborhoods, and I say to myself, I remembered when I was in 5th grade, every grade I was in, because of my athletic ability, whenever they get ready to do kickball, or they get ready to do tetherball, or volleyball, I would be the first one to choose. So the teacher said, you're not going to choose Reggie until the end of picking everybody. So they made it fair. And I never understood it. I thought it was unfair, but because of my athletic ability, that's why they did that. But what I realized is when we as minorities, we actually, folks say you got to go to high school, get your education, try to go to college, get a high education. Then when we complete all those things, we are at the starting block. Now, many decades ago, we weren't, but now we're on the starting block. But the disparities that I see now is that you invest all your time into education, and once you at the starting block, the finish line moves back. You're supposed to be running 100 meters, now it's 150 meters, now it's 200 meters. And that is the disparity part when it comes to minorities. In law enforcement, I actually, when we did the audit, I spoke to the CNA and I said to them that we arrest more African Americans for violent crimes, most African American men. We actually are in contact more African American men in the communities that are actually under socioeconomic situation. We actually, if you look at our use of force, we have more use of force with more of African American men than any race. So I asked them that once this audit is done, that they would actually bring in more education, more systems that can help us to be able to evaluate what we're going to be doing before we do it. Because if you don't get the education before, you just actually winging it. Prior to me, two chiefs before me, whenever a shooting occurred, we would place what we call saturation patrols. That means if Ms. Christensen, let's say you had a shooting down the street from your neighborhood, my officers would be in that neighborhood probably like 6 weeks or so. Now, you will feel comfortable, right? But if you don't give the officers homework, and I'm talking about directed patrol homework on what we're trying to do, if you leave them in the community, what you think they're going to do? They're stuck in the community. They're going to stop everything that moves. They're going to stop everybody that's walking, and they're going to really take control of a community that's not theirs personally. So when I saw that happening, our complaints went up. It was off the chain. So when I looked at it, when I became chief in 2018, I realized that look at what my predecessors were doing. Look at the things that were happening to us. The people that come to North Charleston Police Department for 32 years to file complaints look like me, the majority of them.
Wow.
So it didn't take a rocket scientist to know that I needed to find out why the African American community felt that we weren't serving them in the correct manner. So what I did, I actually brought in Stacey Blake Baird from Boston. She taught unconscious bias-based training. Then I went and I called Tim Scott, who I grew up with. We played football against each other. We were good friends. I said, Tim, I need fair and impartial police training. He brought that in. Then I went to the YWCA. They had the racial equity training, and it was awesome. And see, the YWCA training could go for years and years and years. So I asked them, can we get on at least a 3-year cycle, get you guys locked in? And I don't want them to come in here to teach a class of racial equity 1 month of the year. I want it all the time. See,
Chief
what I want,
that is wonderful. Those strategies are just phenomenal. And I know Carolyn is telling me that we have a few questions.
Okay, go ahead.
We just have 5 minutes left, so we really want to get to the questions. So Carolyn, can you share those questions?
I am actually trying to relay those questions for you from
Okay, great.
who's on the production team. So stand by.
Perfect.
We're coming up with some great information, and we invite you to have. We're tight on time because we've got another session that's coming up, but we are going to get these questions in here and get them answered. Monique, if you can, we have 2 questions for Ellis and Dr. Christensen, and they're in the chat, and I'm looking in the chat as well, and I'm not seeing them, but let me look.
I am actually.
Are you seeing them? Okay.
I am seeing them. So
I am too.
Dr. Christensen, I think this one's for you. Can you please give an example of weathering? Just wants to understand a little bit more that term.
Sure. What happens when you are under a lot of stress. And in this case, the research has been directed at racially caused stress and trauma. You produce more cortisol, you produce more epinephrine, you have different changes in your not nervousness, but your nervous system. And those things create different pressures on your body that make you more susceptible to disease. It's related to stress, but your body produces chemicals or reacts in certain ways that undermine your ability to ward off disease and infection and so forth. It's related, and specifically the weathering research has been related to racial stress. And the importance of access to green spaces and urban can decrease cortisol levels. Anything that, if you're in a place where the temperatures are just unbearable, and the pollution is in the air, that kind of having to deal with that every day, day in and day out, creates stress. And those chemicals start to work on your body and maybe even change your genetic makeup and make you vulnerable to chronic diseases. I hope that starts to explain it. I'll let Britt go ahead with her questions.
You know, absolutely. And I think those epigenetic, which is a complicated word a little bit, you know, and we often think of, especially when we think of, for so long, the National Institutes of Mental Health and National Institutes of Health, both were geneticists that were driving all of that science. And our genes aren't fixed, right? So our genes respond to the environments around us. And exactly as Donna was saying, you know, someone's asking about green spaces and urban tree canopy. Those things are so vital. We are supposed to be within nature. And when we see the lack of public parks or safe public parks, things that are attended to very well in our environments, just being out in nature for a little while decreases your cortisol levels. But if you're in an environment that's unsafe, it makes it much more difficult to be in nature in a relaxed fashion without those cortisol levels really exacerbated.
Two things I just want to, there was a picture in the Richmond article also about parks, and the parks were different. In the white neighborhood, the parks had a lot of trees. In the black neighborhood, they did not. And there was one other thing, and I'm really glad, I don't know who put it in some of this legislation that's going through, but there's a sort of a youth core to plant trees in neighborhoods to begin to address the need for tree cover and reduce the impact of climate change on our communities.
Right, and actually combat the carbon dioxide factors, which is another really important element. And I think that, you know, the more that we see, and I was, you know, now that I'm living in Michigan, I moved from California, seeing that we haven't solved our water crisis at all. And we're increasingly drinking water in plastic, and the plastic is causing environmental issues all over the place. So when we're, you know, we continuously look at these issues. And, you know, having worked, and I'm sure that all of us feel the same way, we're about the same age. We've been doing things that we've known for 30 years we could do better. And yet those solutions are still not there. We're still asking the same questions, the same disparities. And I would say that COVID has even exacerbated those disparities, which, you know, we have the solutions. We just need to have the heart and the resources to do the right thing.
Right. And I think Chief Burgess has been showing us how to do that in his field, and it can apply to all of the rest of us as well.
Absolutely. Carolyn, I just have to ask you, how are we doing on time?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. You know, I would also really just like to talk very briefly about the whole issue with crime rates and, you know, and some of the educational data that we shared. When people have opportunity, they're not in a state of desperation, they're in a state of aspiration. And we really want to differentiate and move people from that state of desperation into that state of aspiration, when they can dream and really see themselves in a better life and have the environments to support that and the resources to support that. So that is really what creating health equity, creating educational equity, and eliminating health disparities is all about.
And it takes social justice action.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's law enforcement. The practices now, they have to think about it. Reform, all the defunding. They need to wake up, because what you do for me, without me, you do to me. So if you're going to actually do anything, you need to have people involved. The community needs to be involved thoroughly with the law enforcement experience, so we can really serve the folks the right way. And when we do that, it's such a positive thing, because now we are included in the community.
Well, perfect timing, everybody. We're right at 10 o'clock, where it's time for us to go into our break. I knew this panel was going to be amazing. We had a couple of wonderful questions, and there was a comment for the chief. They said that the chief was inspiring, and I concur with that. And we thank you for joining us today and being with us. Some great comments. I also shared with our producer to share in the chat an article that ties into much of our conversation on yesterday as well as today. It's from the LA Times. It talks about poor neighborhoods bearing the brunt of extreme heat in many instances and the legacies of racist decision making. So you might want to check that out in the break. It is time for our break. Our break goes until 10:15, and then we will have panel 7. You don't want to miss that. We've got a lot of our participants from the EJ side who will be conducting that panel 7. So we absolutely want you to be with us. And so take your bio break or cell phone break and come on back in 15 minutes. So we'll start back at 10:15. Thank you, everybody. Have a great morning and great break, and we'll see you back.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is our final panel of the 13th National Conference on Health Disparities and the 2021 National Environmental Justice Conference and Training Program. We're so happy to have you with us, and we hope that you have been enjoying all of the programming that has been part of this joint conference that we've been conducting since Wednesday. In this next panel, which is panel 7, this is about educating, motivating, and innovating and building the next generation of environmental justice leaders. So you really don't want to miss this. We have the pleasure of moderating this session this morning, Ms. Joanna Mounds Stansel. She is the Educate, Motivate, Innovate Chairwoman at the USDA Forest Service in Washington, D.C. So at this time, I will turn the program over to Ms. Stansel.
I'm Joanna Mounds Stansel, and I'm the chair of the Educate, Motivate, and Innovate initiative. And I'm so glad you could be with us today. In my other life, I serve as the senior advisor for state and private forestry within the U.S. Forest Service. Co-moderating with me today is Dr. Siobhan Whitlock. She is senior environmental protection specialist with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. We have a slight change to our agenda today. Unfortunately, one of our presenters couldn't join us, and I know that she's very sad about this, so we'll all thank her for her contribution, even though she's not with us today, and her PowerPoint presentation will be up on the conference website after the conference is over so that you can check out her wonderful project on how to save bees. So right now, I'd like to introduce you again to Dr. Siobhan Whitlock, and she's going to introduce our panelists this morning. And then after the end of our presentations, we'll have a Q&A, and then I will be back to close out. All right, Dr. Whitlock.
All right, thank you, Joanna. Good morning, everyone. As Joanna said, I'm Dr. Siobhan Whitlock with the Environmental Protection Agency, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel for the Educate, Motivate, and Innovate Committee. First, I want to start off by introducing our panelists. Joining us today, we have Jeannie Williamson, a colleague of mine who is currently serving as the Region 4 College Underserved Community Partnership Program Coordinator. Jeannie is joining us to talk about our collaborations with EMI. And then along with Jeannie, we have one of our students who will be presenting to you all shortly, Miss Eva Simo. She is a senior biology major at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. As Joanna mentioned, unfortunately, we're missing a presentation today, but that's okay because Jeannie and Eva are going to delight you with the information that they will want to share. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie.
Thank you, Dr. Whitlock. I'm happy to be here today. I'm very excited to share some information about the College and Underserved Community Partnership Program. This is actually a relatively new program for me. Just started in the coordinator position about 3 weeks ago, and I'm very excited to educate, motivate, and innovate students as they come into the program and EPA CUP program. And we partner with a lot of communities in the Southeast. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the CUP program and then introduce Ms. Samo at the end of my presentation. So the College and Underserved Community Partnership Program has a over 10-year history. The program was actually created in EPA Region 4 in 2011. This program has been helping communities outside of EPA, the Region 4 area, the Southeast, for many years. So I think there's projects that have been in Texas and in the Northeast as well. So this program is widely known, and I'm really excited to contribute to all the wonderful projects that have been so greatly needed and appreciated thus far. So currently, the CUP coordinator position in this program is held in the Strategic Programs Office within Region 4 underneath the Regional Administrator's Office. So I work very closely with the environmental justice area, the international program, NEPA, and environmental education. I also work really closely with Region 4's Brownfields program and sustainability. I've actually contacted several of the community members that I've heard on sustainability work group calls and fostered relationships and partnerships and then projects with these communities. Some have been wonderful, specifically Duck Hill, Mississippi, and my partnership with Ramona Williams there in Duck Hill, Mississippi. So as you can see here, we have a flow to the way that projects are put together, the communication and introduction of these universities and communities together. So what initially happens usually is that a community expresses a need. They usually have several needs, usually 8 to 10 different projects that they would like to see come into play, and they would love students' help. But we actually focus on one specific project for these students per semester, and then we build on that relationship and that partnership. So once we've identified that focus project in that community, we then get in touch with the college or university that's close to the community or that can satisfy that need. And I'll give you a couple examples of our projects in just a second. After we have identified the community focus project and then the university that will be helping the community fulfill that technical need, we'll then conduct a kickoff meeting. We'll get to meet all of the partners that will be participating. We'll get to meet the point of contacts. The students will get to meet who they'll be working with on a regular basis in the community. Then we'll conduct a stakeholder meeting. We'll figure out what needs to be done within this project. After we focus that project and we meet everybody, then we try to go ahead and get a project plan together or a work plan together so that the students will know exactly what they're doing for that length of time. And but within that work plan, there's several things that are included. A time frame for when all of the tasks will be conducted, what the goals are for the projects, the outcomes of the projects, the roles and the responsibilities of who will be participating. Then we'll implement the work plan. The work plan is really important. This is the guiding document that kind of gets the project moving and then moves it forward. So then at the very end of the project, which usually when working with students, they usually work on a semester basis, or some of our grad students work on a year-long project for their senior design or senior thesis project. So that could be 2 semesters or a full year. The students will present their findings of the project, their lessons learned, and usually it's through a presentation type outlet, or they'll be able to have a conversation with all the stakeholders involved with the project. But this is the step-by-step process that we go through in setting up a project, meeting the communities, meeting the universities, and then getting the project implemented and started. Just to give you an idea of a few CUP projects that are going on right now. We have a wonderful project grant program that is going on right now. There's been 3 years worth of funding that's been put toward this project. It's the Wing Grant 2107 project. It's a grant program. And this grant, it gives thousands, and actually in Region 4 is up to $10 million worth of funding for states to coordinate testing in lead testing in child care centers and schools, public schools. So we thought there might be, there's limited ways the funding can be used. It can't be used for remediation or mitigation. It has to really be used for testing of these fixtures within these schools and child care centers, and it's licensed child care centers as well. So we thought that we could create a project with a few schools in some of these states that have received the funding, and hopefully they would be able to supplement the project by getting some documents and some information out to the public, education and outreach products, fact sheets on lead exposure, how to reduce lead exposure, and then tracking of the information that we get from the results, and then making some recommendations based on those results. So currently right now we have 4 states participating in this supplemental support project for WIN. Kentucky Division of Water and Kentucky State University, which is an HBCU, they've partnered together to create some risk communication materials for this project. This is how the schools and the child care centers will be able to effectively communicate results out to parents and then the local community. So this is what they're striving to do with this extra project that we've got. And then we've got Mississippi State University. They actually received the grant funding, but they have a side project where they have employed a grad student to pretty much manage a lot of the recommendations that are coming from the results. So if there's mitigation or remediation that's needed, then the student will go back to these schools and child care centers to recommend specific avenues to reduce that exposure of lead in the students. TDEC has also partnered with Lemoyne-Owen College, which they're an HBCU as well. And Lemoyne-Owen has dedicated some time and effort to increase the participation in child care centers in the Shelby County area. So they're dedicating student help in that area. South Carolina and Benedict College. We're also in talks with South Carolina to involve Benedict College with some additional assistance as well to support this WIN grant as well to increase participation in the program. Again, this grant is voluntary, so the more that these students can spread the word and market these programs, the better off we'll be. We'll be able to get a lot of results and hopefully be able to see where there's need in the area of reducing lead exposure in children. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about our partnership with EMI and CUP. So EMI we're actually just brand new to EMI over the last couple of weeks. And I'm excited to say that hopefully we'll be able to partner with EMI on several projects going forward. The great thing about us being able to partner together is, Joanna and her team have lots of contacts in HBCUs and minority serving institutions throughout the country. We have a lot of communities that we hear about in EPA in need of student assistance. So we're hoping to make that connection from community to student, or to community to college and university, so that those projects and volunteer opportunities can be provided to those students. And then hopefully projects will be able to improve the technical assistance and the capacity within those communities. So again, we would be happy to take any questions. If there's anything that you would like to know about CUP, we'll be glad to do that. I would love to answer any questions that you have about the wing grant project that I told you about, but I'm also wanting to go ahead and introduce Eva Samo. She is also a CUP student. So she is participating from Shaw University, which is an HBCU in North Carolina. Eva is originally from Africa, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her background and her history and why she chose to come to Shaw University and get her education and degree in biology. So go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeannie. No, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Just to let you know a little bit about the project that Eva is working on. I actually met Robin Barrows. She is the North Carolina Division of Air Quality representative that is mentoring Eva throughout this process. And Robin has been she works in the education area, outreach and education area within North Carolina DAQ, and she runs a great program there. She's been wonderful to work with throughout this process, and she has this project that she had a great project idea, and she came to CUP and she asked, have you got any students? And so we worked with her to grab a few students from the local Raleigh area from Shaw University. And this has been a great partnership so far, and we hope that we'll be able to work with Robin and North Carolina DAQ for many years to come. Eva's going to tell you a little bit about the project, and hopefully we'll be able to answer questions at the very end. Is that okay, Dr. Whitlow?
Yes, that's what I wanted to announce. I was going to say before Eva starts, and thank you so much for your presentation, Jeannie, as well as, orienting us all with this new partnership this formal partnership with EMI and CUP. So for all audience members, if you have any questions, please place them in the chat box. We will have a Q&A portion as soon as all of the presenters conclude. And so with that, I think we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Eva.
Good morning. Thank you, Jenny. I'm Eva Simo, and I am an international student from Cameroon in Central Africa. I'm currently studying biology with a minor in mathematics at Shaw University. I will be speaking about the commuting alternative, which is a project that I've been working on for a couple of months now. And the end goal of the project is to decrease air emission or air pollution so that environmental justice communities, along with everyone else, could benefit from a clean air on a short and a long term. I've always had great interest in research and projects that could benefit people in need. Coming from Africa myself, I've seen communities living with minimum or no access to proper care, living under very difficult conditions and with no access to clean air or living in polluted environment. And so with that, I've decided to be involved in any program or activity that could that could have a positive effect on underserved people. And with that, I would like to continue my education in the Graduate School of Public Health. where I could do a doctorate program in biostatistics. And the project itself is divided into sections. The project itself is divided into sections, but ultimately the goal is to create a bigger outreach. And I will be focusing on directing the project on Shaw University campus. Just a technical issue. We also said the project is divided into sections, but ultimately all the results will be put together at the end to create a bigger outreach. I'll be focusing on directing the project on Shaw University campus, and since I'm a student there, I will have easier access to information regarding faculty and staff. And as I mentioned, the project was started a couple of months ago and is currently under review. Just a little background about air pollutions. There are a little background about air pollution or air emission. There are multiple pollutants that could travel through the air and contaminate the air. And criteria pollutants are very dangerous because they contain the most toxic pollutants. And those ones are ozone, particle pollution or particulate matter, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, lead, and carbon monoxide. Regarding North Carolina, most of the pollution comes from mobile sources, which are cars, trucks, planes, ships, and any other vehicle that burns and releases fuel into the atmosphere. And other sources are called stationary sources. Those ones don't necessarily move around, and those are produced by huge industries, factories, burning engines, and fossil fuels. So on a bigger scale, more mobile sources means that there will be more air emission and air pollution. So with that in mind, getting people to drive less to Shaw University campus or in areas surrounding or leading to Shaw University campus, we have a significant impact in decreasing air emission from the mobile sources. The outline of the project was designed to collect some information on some evidence regarding the use of mobile sources, how that can affect people or potential environmental justice communities surrounding the campus. So the goal was to identify some of those communities and look at their demographics, see how close they are to campus, if they live close to any transit road, including medium and heavy duty vehicles, and about how extended those areas are. And that will be done using some tools like EJ Screen. And it was important to also identify any staff or faculties living in these areas. And some of the communities that were found were people with education level less than high school, people with low income living below poverty level, and people of color population. So the circle represents about 2 miles radius surrounding Shaw University campus, and the whole area is about 12.5 miles. And these are not the only communities at risk surrounding the campus or in the city. There are many more that are exposed to air emission. And since I'm focusing on campus, I decided to send out a survey first to the faculty and staff at Shaw University, so I can have some information as to how they get to campus every day, how close or far they are from campus, and if they live near or near any transit road. And these are the questions of the survey, and the goal of these questions is to see how to approach everyone with effective solutions, because everyone has a different case. Someone that lives far from campus requires more attention or more alternative options than someone who lives close to campus. So someone who lives close to campus might have, for example, working as an option. The survey was sent, and these are just, it was sent recently, so I don't have a whole bunch of answers now, but from what I have, most of the people who answered, they come to school using their personal cars, and actually all of them, 100% of the people who answered use their personal cars to come to campus, and 60% of those people live about 60% of those people live more than 10 miles away from campus. And so because there are so many factors that are making every case different, and the solution will first be to start a campaign on campus where there will be talks about pollution and how bad it is to release toxic compounds in the air. And other alternatives will be proposed as well, such as the city bus, train, bike, scooters, carpool, or van pool. And also other solution will be to explain the benefit and the incentives of those alternatives. And during the campaign, it will be important to see how decreasing air emission can have a positive impact on underserved communities, and not only on underserved communities, but beneficial to everyone else in the long term. And another solution would be to spread awareness through media or social media outreach. And I would really insist on transport alternatives because they're the actual core of the solutions. So, and for people who live far from campus, the van pool and the carpool options will be proposed and discussed because they have really great benefits. Go Triangle, which deals with public transportation here in Raleigh, provides the van pays for the gas and all the expenses, all the maintenance, which is a very great incentive, and all it really costs is to have a monthly fee that can be shared with commuters. So right here, this is the van pool that can be offered by Good Triangle if someone is interested. And for people who live near the campus, for example, options like the city bus will be offered because the city bus is free, and even when it costs, Shaw University has a discount for all the faculty, staff, and the students. And also the city bikes and the scooters are distributed across the city, and their location can be tracked online. All the information are easily accessible online, and the website will be discussed and will be provided during the campaign talks on campus. Also, the MCHAP train is an option as well. It's available 4 times a day for people traveling long distance to Cary, Durham, Greensboro, and Charlotte. And the city bus also reaches those areas on a daily basis. And another good benefit is that in case of emergencies, there are emergency rides. Those ones are called ERH, emergency ride homes, that could provide immediate rides in case something happens with the carpool or the van pool. And all the information about each alternative will be totally discussed on campus as the project goes on. And the outcome of this project on Shaw University campus can be used to encourage employees from other companies or businesses around North Carolina cities to drive less and choose other commuting alternatives. And this project was a collaboration between Shaw University, EPA, and North Carolina Division of Air Quality. I was pleased to be approached with this project by my advisor, Dr. Refford, and I'm currently assisted by Mrs. Barrows from NC Division of Air Quality and Mrs. Williamson from EPA as this project is carried on. My contact is evasimo9@gmail.com, and I'm open to any comment, questions regarding this project presentation, and I will be happy to engage via email about any thoughts or ideas. Just to circle back, I would also like to thank Shaw for giving me the opportunity to study in the US. Coming from an African country, the currency is very different, so it really costs a lot, but Shaw University really provided enough financial support and scholarship for me to continue with my studies from my first year till now. And I'm proudly graduating in December, and I will really take this opportunity to thank my university for allowing people like me coming from other countries to be able to have a better education. Thank you all. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for that, Eva. That was absolutely wonderful. And I think we do have questions in the chat. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are interested in hearing more about CUP, as well as the partnerships and now the work that you've been able to do in North Carolina as a result of the CUP program. So at this time, do we have any questions? I am looking and I do not see any in the chat.
I'll go ahead and get one because I'm curious.
Thank
Eva, is there something that are you going to go back to your homeland now that you're part of us here in the U.S. and advance and take what you've learned here and share it there? Or how will you use all this wonderful education and knowledge and experience that you're gaining? Let's say within a year after you graduate. I know you're going to be a continuing student, but how do you see your role now?
Well, first, I really want to get a doctorate degree in biostatistics. And after that, I'm definitely planning on going back home, because I think that one of the problems in Africa is that people are not aware of what is going on. We have difficulties adapting with the healthcare because people do not have access to proper healthcare, and I think that is because some people are ignorant. They're not really aware of the many options, or they're not really aware of what's going on. So my plan is really to try to reach everyone else. Doesn't matter how far or deep in the country they live. So I think that bringing everyone to be aware of everything regarding healthcare or pollution and environment, that will really be a very of great help to my country or to my community. So my goal is to really bring everyone to be aware of what is going on.
Thank you, and I wish you well on that. Exciting.
So I have a question for you, Eva. So considering your preliminary results and some of the transportation alternatives that you discussed, have you thought about any expansions of this project or any additional research topics that you'd like to explore now that you've had the opportunity to deliver this and work through some of your other efforts?
Well, another project that I'm really interested in is the use of plastic, because I really think that plastic is one thing to discuss. Myself, I'm trying to use less plastic daily, and my biology teacher told me that currently some people have like tiny particles of plastic in their organism. Mm-hmm. So I think that is something that should be very looked into, because plastic is very convenient on a daily basis, going to the grocery store for anything nowadays. So I think that this project and the project regarding the use of plastic is something that can be very interesting to me.
Dr. Whitlow, I have just one quick thought on that question too. So we are working with Shaw University, Dr. Kimberly Rayford. We are asking that she find us another student too, because Eva is actually retiring, not retiring, and graduating in December. And so she'll be moving on to her graduate studies very soon. And so we've asked Dr. Rayford to find us another student or a couple of students to continue the work in this project. So we're really wanting to expand the project. We have Ms. Barrows from North Carolina DAQ. She has a whole plan, so there's going to be more investigation into some solutions, and then outreach and education, like what Eva had mentioned earlier. There's a hope that there'll be something like TED Talks that will be on social media that can educate the public, and then Shaw University students and faculty. So an expansion of the project and continuing this project is definitely planned. Okay.
Well, I think that is absolutely wonderful. And again, considering the data that you showed and looking specifically at the disadvantaged communities that surround Shaw University that are directly impacted, there's a need to continue this work. So thank you, Eva, and thank you, Jeannie, for getting things together and organizing it so that we can continue these partnerships. If there aren't any other questions, we're going to conclude, and I'm going to turn it over to Joanna Stansel, our fearless leader, to close us out. Joanna?
Sometimes more fearless than others. But anyway, thank you. Excellent presentations. Thank you, Gina and Eva, and thank you, Dr. Whitlock, for pulling all of this together and making this a wonderful opportunity. I did want to share one thing in closing. EMI, the Educate, Motivate, and Innovate Initiative, will be back in March for the next round with the National Environmental Justice Conference and Training Program. So we will be starting to recruit in a couple of weeks now for students for that session. And hopefully our students that couldn't join us today will be able to come back in March and present her presentation. But also I wanted to share that the CUP and EMI collaboration has a third partner, and that is the White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council Rural Communities Committee. This trio is going to be set loose on the world soon, and hopefully through working with the CUP students, the Rural Community Committee, will be able to have more of an impact on how we could help rural community address their environmental justice, their climate change, whatever their needs that fall within that arena, be able to help them with community revitalization. There's a host of things these wonderful students that attend the minority serving institutions can do to help the communities they come from or the communities where they go to school in or nearby. So we're very excited about seeing how we can expand this effort, this partnership, and then in future years report those accomplishments back during the conference like this, like NEJC. And we hope you'll be join us on that ride as we explore this collaboration and build on it. And all I can say is students have a lot to give and a lot of power, and they're our hope for the future. So hopefully everybody that watched this and as part of the conference will be there to support these students, seek opportunities for them. If you've got an internship, think about one of these students for that, or a fellowship, and just be part of their future as they build it. And I thank you for being part of this presentation today, and we hope you'll join us again in March. And that we will conclude.
And thank you, Ms. Stansel, for moderating an excellent panel. It is so exciting to see the future of leadership in EJ. And you mentioned the conference. The conference is in fact coming up in March. It's going to be the 9th through the 11th. So you want to mark your calendar and make plans to be there in Washington, D.C. It will be an in-person conference. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back in just a few moments with our closing remarks, and you don't want to miss it. So I told you it would be a very short break. Welcome back. We're happy to have you back. And this is our portion of the program where we share with you some closing thoughts. We hope this has been 3 days of inspirational information for you, and know that you have access to recordings if you'd like, so that you can review what occurred on Wednesday, Thursday, as well as today. I'd like to, at this time, invite in a few folks. You've met a lot of friends of this conference that have been supporters for a long time, but these things just don't happen. They actually require some vision, and they require planning, and they require commitment. And I'd like to introduce you to two individuals who fall into that category of those three headings. The first is Mr. Benjamin F. Wilson. He's an attorney and chairman of Beveridge and Diamond PC. He's also the chairman of the board of directors for the National Environmental Justice, Inc. out of Washington, D.C. And so we welcome Mr. Wilson. And then Melinda Downing, who is the Environmental Justice Program Manager you met at the beginning of our conference. She's with the U.S. Department of Energy in Washington, D.C. I'd invite all of you all to take a few moments to listen to their closing thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Sawyer, and wanted to thank each of you for being with us at this very special conference. This is the 13th year of the joint conference, but it's also the 14th year of our National Environmental Justice Conference, and we are so proud of that. Ms. Sawyer was very generous in suggesting that I have a prominent role, but I think we all know the two key people here are Lloyd Moore, who is responsible for coordinating all things with the conference, and the woman who conceived of this so many years ago, Melinda Downing. And she is a great blessing to so many of us. And I know those of you that may be within the sound of my voice know that to be true. You see, it's no coincidence that we're looking to join health disparities along with environmental justice. There can be little doubt that the climate change issue is a great challenge of this 21st century. But there can be no way that we can have address climate change without addressing environmental justice, without addressing climate justice. And that's what this conference does. And our interest is not simply in the climate being safe. That alone ought to be great enough. But ultimately, our interest is in the health and welfare of people and planet. And so critical, so important to us. Thank you to our speakers. I want to say that I've determined that I will retire from the active practice of law. And I've been, I believe, the chairman from the very beginning of this conference, and will step down now. But it has been a privilege and an honor to play a small part in this program. We have a dynamic board of directors, and their contribution is also significant, without which we would not be here. So thank you so much for this privilege. Thank you for the care and concern that you are showing for others. Thank you for the difference you have made. You see, when I was growing up and we would go to a concert, at some point they would say, "Are you not entertained?" What I hope, though, the question we wish to ask is, are you not inspired? Are you not inspired to act, to make a difference, to make our planet better, to ensure environmental justice, to ensure the health of generations to come? I cannot think of a greater and nobler purpose. Thank you so much.
Good morning. To close us out, on behalf of both conferences, we thank our speakers, our panelists, each and every one of you for taking the time to be here. And let's remember, while the conference is a valuable resource, environmental justice is not a one-size-fits-all. We hope that you gain the tools you need to advocate for yourselves and share your knowledge with others who could not be here. I would like to give a special thank you to our conference facilitator, Ms. Carolyn Sawyer, and to the conference team, Dr. Letitia Abraham-Hilaire, Ms. Naisha Bukongo, and Ms. Monique Hill, and to all the members of the planning committee, and to one important person, Mr. Ian Cross, our technical expert, and all who have made this conference possible. Last but not least, a special thank you to Mr. Lloyd Moore, our EJ conference coordinator and guru, who is behind the scene, but magically making this and all our past conferences a smooth operation and success. And lastly, to our conference leader, who just made an announcement I'm not happy about, but I understand, and chairman of the board for NEJC, Mr. Ben Wilson, who has been our captain of this ever-evolving journey. So even though he is retiring from his firm, he's not retiring from us. We will always depend on him, look to him for future guidance and insight. So thank you, Ben, for everything. And all of you, thank you for being here. We look forward to keeping the momentum going, and be safe. And I'll turn the mic over to Carolyn.
Thank you, Dr. Downing, and much thanks to you for your commitment and your hard work and dedication. And I also would be remiss if I didn't mention Dr. David Rivers and his commitment for leading along the lines of the health disparities and merging the two. And so the both of you all, we appreciate your visionary thoughts and direction as we try to tackle this problem in our country. Lloyd Moore tells me that we will be in Washington, D.C. in March on the 9th through the 11th in person. And so you want to mark your calendar and make plans to join us in Washington, D.C. as we actually hold the 2022 National Environmental Justice Conference and Training Program. I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, be safe. I'm Carolyn Sawyer signing off for this year. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.